So, everybody's gonna have this problem at some point when you are putting in a garden. Where do you put it? A few things to consider, because you don't want to put it in and then end up having to move it later because your vegetable garden isn't producing well because the soil's bad, or you've got terrible sunlight, or whatever. So, things to consider when planting a garden. Number one, the amount of sun. And here at the end, I'm going to show you kind of where my garden area is. So, amount of sunlight. Why is that important? Most vegetables need at minimum 8 hours of sun a day. So that means you're probably not going to plant your garden under the shade tree. Sorry. Great for working in, not great for your vegetable patch. Are there plants that grow under trees? Well, yes. And those, do your research. You can put a little bit there. Cool season ones can sometimes do really good on the edge of the tree, right at the edge of the shadow or shade line, because it'll keep, especially if it's on the west side, so the heat of the day, the tree is shading it, because it keeps the soil temperatures cooler. They do better, especially if you have hot summers. So, light, an amount of light. Number two, soil type. If your soil is a thick clay, probably not going to work very well in a garden. Yes, you can make it work. My garden, actually, right back here, this actually used to be old house foundation. Had terrible soil in it. The guy could not get anything to grow. When we moved, it was grown up in shrub trees, and he had just rocked it. So we made it work. We had to actually haul dirt in, though, which was not that big of a deal because we also have a feedlot, so we just scraped it out of the feedlot pens when we were scraping up. So it became a very rich, lush soil. Now, several years later, it is bountiful. That first year it had old feedlot dirt. Every year after that fall, I fertilized really, really heavy with horse poop from the horse pen, and every year it gets just a little bit more fertilizer out of the horse barn and horse pen. So it's a really, really good, really productive, really rich soil now. Did not start out that way. If you have really sandy soil, some plants actually do really well there. Potatoes can do really good in sandy soil. A lot of plants don't like it though because it doesn't hold enough. It either holds too much or not enough. So, and the nutrients aren't there that they need to thrive. So, the gold standard would be to actually pull soil samples from the areas you're thinking, get their nutrition profile, what type of soil they are, to see if it's something that will work. Did I do that? No. I went, that looks like a good spot for the garden, and that's where it's gonna go. So, and I've made it work from there. Shelter. So, some shelter is a good thing. Like, you see the windbreak behind me? That's a very thick windbreak. What it does for my garden is it actually warms the garden up faster in the spring because it's completely open to the south. So it gets all the sunshine, and this windbreak behind me blocks north wind. So there's very little wind. It actually, when we have had frost, like light frost warnings, because of our tree line, it actually blocks most of it. So it doesn't actually frost inside here in the yard where the garden is. On the perimeter, out by the horse pen, a lot of times it will be. There's not as much shelter out there. North of the trees, away on the west side of the house, west of the windbreak, a lot of times I'll get a light frost there. But inside the yard here, it'll actually stay fairly sheltered, fairly warm. Or at least relatively, compared to out there. A few degrees, but that makes a lot of difference, especially with things like peppers and tomatoes and such. Water. I'm trying to remember all my points here. Water is the other factor. You want to be able to have water someplace close, within easy hose distance. You don't want to have to drag a quarter mile of hose. Not fun. I hate dragging hoses anyway. I'm a person, I lay them out in the summertime, first spring, and they stay out until fall when I pick them up. So I actually have hoses. The hydrant is on back there, far northwest corner of the garden. And that hydrant will actually feed the entire garden, plus my raised beds back here behind the pond and this whole area. I drag the hoses out once and then set markers for the sprinklers and then just move the sprinkler so I don't have to drag a whole bunch of hose. And I will actually just switch the hoses at the hydrant. So yeah, what was the other one? I think that's it. So, amount of light. Oh, line of sight is the other thing. So a lot of older gardens, especially the old style garden where they till up like a huge plot. The only space to do that was like in the back of the property, right? Well, there's multiple issues with that. Number one, it's out of your sight. It takes a lot to maintain when you're tilling up that much. And it's out of your sight, so you're not constantly going out there. My garden is in my front yard. You see it right as you pull in the driveway. I see it from my kitchen window. I see it all the time when I'm doing chores, the kids are playing, whatever. So I'm in it a lot. Like, number one, I like to be in my garden. But number two, it's a constant visual reminder to go out and do something. So put your garden, no matter how big, in a space where you're going to be seeing it. I have a garden plot. It's our orchard plot that's out back of the house. It's kind of out of sight. I don't look at it as much. That one tends to get neglected. I'll be honest. I don't see it. It's not in the forefront of my mind because I'm not actually seeing it every day. So yeah, light, amount of light. Make sure you're getting plenty of sun. You can use the shadows or shade to your advantage. Read more about that in the blog. I'll link it. And soil type, line of sight, watering, accessibility, and shelter. So I will flip this around here and kind of show you where my garden is, where it started. If I can get it to flip. I might just have to do it this way. So this back here is actually where my garden started. I had to put a fence around mine because of the rabbits. This is where it started. It actually was only 3/4 of that. And then I decided I needed a bigger garden, so I moved the fire pit to where I'm standing now. This is now the fire pit area. And I've just kind of slowly been expanding the garden since. We put in, turn around again, that tunnel back there. Last year, it kind of failed because the chickens kept breaking into it. And I got to put better wire around it this spring. I've got 3 raised beds back here now to grow things in, and these will actually be protected with motion sprinklers. And then I actually have another set of raised beds over here. The sun will cooperate with me, protected with wire from the chickens. And there's actually going to be a new set going between that raised bed and the garden. There'll be a giant E, and the garden itself is actually getting a better frame protective net over it because, yeah, this one did not last. It worked well, but we're actually going to put a solid hail fence over it to keep the chickens out. Free range chicken problems. Protect your flowers or fence your chickens. And I'm choosing to protect the flowers because, yeah, I like my chickens free ranging. They eat all the bugs.